The Blue Angels of the U.S. Navy. The aircraft is an F-18. It can fly at almost Mach 2, twice the speed of sound. Each plane weighs 18 tons. Its range is 2,300 miles. Its ceiling 10 miles high. Its twin engines have a combined thrust of 32,000 pounds, which means, theoretically, it can just about take off standing on its tail, straight up, like a rocket. The people who repair this airplane, who keep it in the air, do it better and faster and cheaper than ever before, in part because they read a book. This girl was born 3 months too early. She weighs just over 1 pound. She is sick and in peril. She's only alive because of intensive care. The doctors and the nurses who care for these children receive supplies from a company unlike any other. The company hired the authors who wrote the book. These people come from the factory floor. They're machinists and first-line supervisors. One morning, they made a presentation to their company's largest customer. At stake was a $2 million order. And as the meeting began, the boss walked out, the general manager. He had never done that before. He left because he had read the book.
And if we are really in an age where the critical difference in an organization is the capital, the intellectual capital of all the people in the organization, if that's the real critical, sustainable competitive advantage, then the organization that will survive is one that can tap the capacities of all the people, not just the few in the leadership position.
Dr. Jim Belasco is professor of business management at San Diego State University, a veteran business owner, as well as a consultant, lecturer, and author. His partner is Ralph Steyer, also a consultant, as well as the CEO of Johnsonville Foods in Wisconsin.
Jim and I are both businessmen. We didn't do this because it's some great altruistic undertaking. We did this to make an honest buck. In fact, to make more honest bucks than we were making the other way. This is not because it's an interesting social experience. It's because this is a more profitable, more secure way to do business.
Jim Belasco and Ralph Steyer are the authors. The book is called Flight of the Buffalo, Soaring to Excellence, Learning to Let Employees Lead. The American buffalo gather in a herd. There is a single leader. If you stampede the head buffalo over a cliff, the rest of the herd will follow. They are dependent upon him for directions and instruction. They cannot act alone, independently. Without him, the herd is confused, panicked, lost. Geese are very different. They fly in a team, a V formation, and each bird takes its turn fighting the wind, being the leader. That means each one has to know the common destination and then choose the right speed and direction in order to get there. At any given moment, each bird must be capable of leading all the others. The challenge, then, at the Furon Company, a $300 million manufacturer of polymer seals, hoses, and gaskets, is how to get the buffalo to turn into geese. At Owens & Minor, a $1 billion distributor of medical and surgical supplies, the challenge, then, is to get every leader, from floor supervisor to CEO, to teach and coach and help their people to fly, to make good decisions without being told. The challenge, then, at the North Island Naval Depot in San Diego, where the U.S. Navy repairs the fleet's F-18 fighters, is how to help employees grow and learn so that they can do their job and the managers can do theirs, meet with customers, plot strategy, and plan for the future. Well, Belasco and Steyer say for an organization to change, the leader has to change. That's the first critical step.
The leader lays down the tracks, lays down the behavioral tracks, where people, what people do, where people go. The leader is the symbol of the organization and reflects the organization. And what the leader reflects is what the people are going to do. So as an example, when the leader makes all the decisions, the leader is the one who gives all the answers. Then the next people down also make all the decisions and give all the answers. And the next people down make all the decisions and give all the answers. Because that's the pattern. That's what good looks like. That's what excellent looks like.
So if
you have to understand that any organization that's been operating for a while, is the results they're getting is based on what they've been doing and the signals that have been sent as to what good looks like. So if you want different results, different behaviors, then the leader has to be different first, has to walk the talk, as they say, or people won't take the lead and won't do anything different. No matter what you say, they're going to do what they've always done until the leader's different.
And different how?
Well, in my own case, I had to stop answering questions and start asking questions. I had to stop making people's decisions for them. I had to send them back out of the office and say, that's your decision. Now, if you need some help from me so that you can make that in the future so I don't have to be bothered with these things, that's fine. I had to stay out of meetings. I had to tape record my meetings so that I would learn to speak second or last, not first, because every time I spoke first, that set the tone.
You see, people will follow as long as we insist on leading. As long as I insist on making the decisions, people will be more than willing to let me do that. They'll be more than willing to do that. It doesn't make sense, and they hate it, and they withdraw their labor, their real talent. But they will, if you're the boss, you're supposed to.
Years ago, Jim Belasco was the manager of a manufacturing plant. Once a month, he met with a council of employees.
And then I would spend the rest of the month solving their problems. And we'd meet the next month, and I'd report back to them. Here's what I did. I fixed this water fountain, fixed this, and so on.
What's wrong with that?
Oh, I spent a lot of my time. It turned out they were world-class problem finders. They could find problems faster than I could find the time to solve them. I was spending all my time solving their problems. It's when I decided this was crazy. This was wrong. I said, from now on, we're not going to do this anymore. And the next time the opportunity presented itself, when we had a case where we had to make a significant change, and rather than me making the decision, I got them involved, and I gave them the problem, and I gave them the responsibility. They kept trying to give it back to me because they thought I would take the problem back, and I wouldn't. I said, no, thank you, not my job. I shouldn't be solving the problem. And each time they tried to give it back to me, I gave it back to them. They came in originally and said they needed $500,000 worth of equipment to solve this problem. I said, we haven't got $500,000. And they went back, grumble, 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 grumble. They came back with another plan that was $10,000 worth of equipment that solved the problem.
What we'll have to look at is from the material standpoint.
In July 1993, a potential new customer walked into this conference room at the Furon Company to listen to a sales presentation. The customer was Carrier. They were looking to buy Teflon seals for their air conditioners. Furon engineers, technicians, and factory workers made the sales pitch. The plant manager wasn't here. At the start of the meeting, he walked out.
It's a major behavior change, something that I probably would have never done in the past. I wanted to be there holding the customer's hand, making sure everybody said the right thing, and not really working on this ownership transfer. So the power of me changing my behavior and walking out of that meeting, they owned it.
Is that a tough thing to do?
I tell you what, it was one of the most difficult things that I had ever done before from a behavior standpoint. I walked into this office next door, and I sat on like I was sitting on eggs.
Furon employees had worked for months on the manufacturing problems, how to build their seals cheaper and faster, with near-perfect quality and a fraction of the waste. They must have been convincing. Carrier not only awarded them the contract, but increased it by $500,000.
That night, when I was at dinner with the customer, they said it was the most incredible thing they've ever saw.
It amazed me that the company would actually let me come in and actually talk to a customer that was of, that is of so importance to our company. You're not talking a little, nickel dime outfit. You're talking about the multi-million-dollar account, and here they're going to take me off the floor and put me in front of this customer and let me tell him what I do to ensure him that he's going to get good product.
You sort of build trust in your customer when you let your customer actually deal with the people on the floor. And you say, hey, this is a neat company. This is really neat. I'm not getting this BS from someone else. I'm really getting the true facts.
From the people on the floor.
Yes.
For the factory manager to let others lead, he had to change. And the company president had to change as well.
First of all, I listened more. Buffalo doesn't listen much, and I was not a good listener. And I've become a much better listener and much more involved with not doing, but helping others do. And that's a key change. That's a very, very important change.
Okay, reach 1-4, you cleared down with reported beam heading 025. 1-4.
When the boss's behavior changes, nobody's job stays the same. The USS Saratoga was scheduled for duty in the North Atlantic at the first of the year, 1994. But 10 aircraft, half its squadron of F-18s, were out for mandatory maintenance. New parts, new paint, nose-to-tail inspection and repair. That's what they do here. But they had never done it inside the Saratoga's deadline of 60 days. In fact, the normal repair turnaround for an F-18 took between 4 and 5 months.
My first thought was, unless some changes were made, it was going to be impossible. It was going to be impossible to make it. I thought that there's just no way. We'd never done it, and there was just no way.
Not if they worked in the same old way. The question was the obvious. How do we save time? The innovation came in who was allowed to answer. Not the managers, but the men and women on the line. Earl Hayes, mechanic crew leader. He's worked in this plant for 27 years. Terry Tim, a foreman on the flight line, here for 17 years. Steve Robles, 15 years, production controller. Greg Colbrand, an aircraft inspector. He's been here 12 years. Together, these guys came up with a few ideas. Evaluate the plane in flight on its way to San Diego, so you can figure out some of what needs to be fixed before the plane even arrives. On the inbound flight, refuel with JP-5. It dries faster than JP-4, and you can't work on an airplane until the fuel tanks are completely dry. Pre-position equipment, parts, and supplies. Add a third shift. Have one department or shift fully brief the next before they hand over the plane. Check the repair history of each aircraft. You may be able to anticipate what parts you'll need and order them in advance. There were 100 ideas, and as you probably guessed, they beat the deadline. The longest turnaround was 36 days. One plane went out in 29. The Saratoga got her planes on time. What made the difference?
The involvement of the people in the process. Instead of a plan being handed down from on high, people were included in the process, and we met as a group and we said, hey, what's really the best way to do this? And the folks who do the job know the best way to do the job.
People tend to respond a whole lot better if you brought them into the process. Nobody likes to be told what to do and that their opinion isn't valued. And I found as I went on that the more I brought people into the decision-making process and asked them their opinions, that it got a whole lot easier to do from a management standpoint.
It got easier?
It got easier from a management standpoint. I mean, I think in the old days, the manager was supposed to know everything. I don't know everything, and I'll be the first to admit that the guys on the floor know more about putting that airplane together than I ever will. So why not listen to them?
Today, you have to listen. There's just too much to do, too much to know. There are almost 40,000 subassemblies on the aircraft these people have to repair. Today, they're competing with other Navy and Air Force bases, as well as private industry for contracts to repair the F-18. Top-down just doesn't work anymore. Still, in any business, in any industry, in every corner of America, how do you empower employees? How do you motivate them to not only make decisions, but make the right decisions?
Let me describe a situation. I'm working with an owner of a 30,000 square foot retail set of small shops in a relatively rural area. And he has read the book. He wants to empower his people. So he calls his people together and says, from now on, you're empowered. From now on, you're going to decide schedules, you're going to do the ordering, you're going to do everything. From now on, you're empowered. Wonderful thought. Guess what happened? People started taking off, Shops stopped being manned all the time. The long-distance calls went through the roof as people called their boyfriends, girlfriends in other areas, and sales dropped like a stone. He comes back and says, Belasco, what is this empowerment stuff? Doesn't work. I said, John, what you did was not empowerment. I'm sorry, it wasn't empowerment. It was abdication. You threw the stuff over the transom and then you left. That's not empowerment, that's abdication. What you need to do is you need to help those people to see what their personal responsibility is for their customers. The only way you can ever successfully run a business is if you manage that business from the customer in. And every single person in the organization, it's a very important principle going forward, I think. Every single person in the organization needs to have line of sight to a customer.
Truly.
Truly. And every single individual needs to see how their business, their actions, what they do on their job, how that impacts and affects that customer. And they have to see it. They have to have a contract with that customer about what they're going to do to help that customer succeed. They need to have feedback from that customer about how they're doing on succeeding or not succeeding. They have to be paid on that basis. That customer has to be involved in their performance appraisal. All of these actions need to take place so that basic bottom line is every single person in the organization needs to have line of sight, connection with external customers.
In the beautiful farmland between Milwaukee, Wisconsin and Green Bay, the home office of Johnsonville Foods, Ralph Stayer took over the family's sausage business after graduating from college. This is where he learned the importance of getting employees to meet with his customers.
We talked about empowerment. We talked about personal responsibility in my own business. And people would say, why should I do that? We talked about trying to be great. And people said, well, yeah, that's a lot of work. And that's your job.
It's a hard job.
It's a hard job. It wasn't until we started exposing people to customer feedback. Again, when we went to the shop floor and said, you make the sausage, you get the customer feedback. I did something else. I used to answer all the complaints. People would send in a complaint. We had a bone in the sausage, or one of our retailers, we got the wrong label on the product. And I used to answer all those things diligently because that's what I'm told I'm supposed to do. The president or some customer service department in a big company should answer this. What we do is we insulate our people from customer feedback. Our people are just busy making stuff, doing stuff. Hey, we're doing a great job.
Who gets the complaint letters now?
Now, we give the complaint letters to the people who caused the problem. If there was a bone in the sausage, the people who made the sausage, who ground it up, have to deal with that.
They make the call back?
They make the call back. They send a letter. They tell people what we're doing, what our process is, how we've changed our process based on the complaints or the issues that we've had. And our complaints have dropped like a stone.
Owens & Minor is the second largest distributor of medical and surgical supplies in the nation. The company is 112 years old. At their warehouse in Los Angeles, they service dozens of hospitals in the metro area. Their largest customer is the medical center at UCLA. In fact, these men will take from the shelves almost $2 million worth of syringes and gloves and masks and bandages per month and send them to UCLA. It's a big hospital. 700 beds, almost 4,000 employees. The on-site manager for Owens & Minor is Joe Chavez. A year ago, he brought in some of his colleagues, people from the warehouse, from purchasing and customer service, and he gave them a tour.
Well, what I did is I took them into an NICU unit, little babies. They can relate to a little baby, unlike an adult. And, a lot of these people, they have little nieces, little kids of their own, nephews, and the impact was just good,
In what way?
In that they could relate to that in the event that one of their kids were here in the hospital. They would want to make sure that if the nurse were to reach into a supply area and reach for a particular item, that'd be the right item. When you're an NICU baby in an incubator, your chances aren't all that great, so don't take the chances away from them.
Has it helped?
Oh, very much so, yes. Yeah.
How can you tell?
Oh, you can just tell because we have an auditing process here at the medical center, and someone goes behind and checks, the products that are being issued to the supply cart, and we monitor that. And the errors have reduced drastically as a result of that.
In fact, he says errors dropped by over 50%. Why? What is it about seeing a patient in a bed, a child in intensive care, that affects your work in a warehouse 20 miles away? Andre Clark pulls supplies from the stacks at Owens & Minor warehouse. He's been here for 2 years. He visited UCLA, and today, these are no longer just cardboard boxes.
I don't know if any of the other guys think about it, but sometimes I do when I'm polling or something. I start thinking about the patients, and I think, they probably need, these, whatever we're polling. It could
Supplies.
be catheters, basically supplies, and I just think, they need it more than anybody, does. They're patients, and they need it, so I just do the best I can and pull as quick as I possibly could.
I think more about the patients. The patients are the end users. So, sometimes it can be a life or death situation, and it's just as important to me as it is to that nurse or doctor or patient on the other end. So I feel the concern. I feel the urgency.
When I took over the Ink Company.
The Ink
Company, right? And the business was losing money. And we had a great franchise, but we were losing money. We had been losing money year after year. And rather than cut the business, chop, 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 with typical American way, what you do is we got the employees to go out and talk to customers, something never done before. People who were busy mixing ink. One day a month, I offered, I'll pay for your trip. Go. Talk to a customer. The only requirement is that you tell the rest of us what you've learned that customer wants us to do.
What was the impact?
The impact was within 3 months, we went from a negative position to a positive position. We gained 6 points in market share within the first 6 months because they went out and talked to customers, didn't pay them anymore. There was no bonus share, none of this. They went out and they talked to customers, and suddenly they came back and they had a vested interest because now it was their customer.
I couldn't get people to take ownership until they started hearing from customers. So the only reason they worked was because they heard from customers, or really put forth their best effort, was because they heard from customers. They wouldn't do it for me, but they would do it for their customers.
Wonder why?
Pride. When you deal with a telephone and you deal with a face, which is more motivating, the telephone or the face?
The face.
Obviously.
The person.
The person. We don't work for companies. We don't sell to companies. We don't buy from companies. We buy a General Motors car from a car dealer and a salesperson. We buy it from an individual. And it is that person-to-person contact that makes the difference. Companies don't buy from each other. People buy from each other. And once you involve faces, once I have my face involved.
Now it matters.
That's right. Because now it matters because I'm talking to another human being and I have a personal connection. It is now not a faceless they. It now is a living, breathing human being with hopes and dreams and aspirations and fears much like I do.
Much like me.
That's right.
The stories are endless. A few years ago, the former commanding officer at the Naval Aviation Depot started asking his people to visit their customer.
Motivates them. I had a guy down here in the E-2 hangar who said once in a while he would get in his truck and drive down to the flight line and watch the plane take off, because all he ever did was crawl up inside them taking apart in the hangar. And it really kept him focused on his job to see them fly. And so he had to go see real human beings, get into real airplanes that got off the ground. And that was how he stayed focused on his job.
Gives his job some meaning.
Exactly.
At the Naval Depot, at the Furon Company, at Owens & Minor, employees, factory workers, and supervisors and foremen are now talking to customers, visiting their plants, helping make the sale. They're also solving their customers' problems.
The focus is not only on creating customer satisfaction, on finding out what customers want. The focus is on finding out what helps customers succeed. The focus is to go beyond the narrow product, the narrow niche in which you're engaged. It's the old story of the railroad industry. They saw themselves being in the railroad business, not in the transportation business. And so when trucks and airlines came along, they went out of business. The same is true for AT&T, Global Information Solutions. They sell hardware. Well, gee whiz, you can only sell gee whiz technology for so long before someone else has better gee whiz technology. What you need to sell to that customer is, how can you and I work together so that together we can help you gain market share?
We worked with another division of AT&T called GBCS. One of their area sales groups, units, we were working with a salesperson. And that salesperson, we said, how will you do this year? And they said, well, I'm not going to do well because my customer only has $300,000 in their budget for communication technology, like equipment. And we said, well, who are we talking to? Well, we're talking to the information technology people, the people who buy the equipment. I said, what are the customers' real main problems, their biggest issues? What do they need to accomplish this year? So we actually encouraged the salesperson and that salesperson's coach to meet with marketing and operations people. And they discovered that they had a huge customer satisfaction problem. People would hang up, they couldn't answer the phones in time. We didn't have good linkage to create good service, and they discovered that they were adding tremendous costs at the same time. Our people looked at that and said, but if you were to put in this call center process, it's going to cost you $6 million. But we guarantee you your customer satisfaction will go up by X amount of points. We can guarantee you this much of a cost savings because you won't have to add all these people. We can show you. We have data. So when they changed the thinking, when they went beyond just selling the product to how can I make a difference in the customer's business? How can I help them see things they haven't seen?
They went from 300,000 to 6 million.
That's just this year.
In this warehouse, all the supplies intended for UCLA are owned by Owens & Minor until they're actually used. Owens & Minor buys the supplies, stores them, ships them daily to the hospital, and then their employees actually resupply all the nurses' stations on all the floors. That bandage belongs to Owens & Minor until the nurse actually reaches in and grabs it. 3 years ago, UCLA had over 300 vendors. Now they have one. They no longer need a warehouse, an inventory, or a staff to buy and keep track of supplies. Total savings, $3 million per year. And some of that because supplies are cheaper from Owens & Minor.
We were finding tremendous markups from our campus storehouse in the past.
The warehouse on campus.
Right. The campus used to buy inventory from the manufacturers and resell it to the hospital. And so the Owens & Minor upcharge was much less than that. So we found some considerable cost savings in just the price of the items.
Everybody wins. UCLA is saving millions. Owens & Minor is now their exclusive distributor. In fact, UCLA is now their biggest account. All because they were able to sell their customer more than just a product, a box of bandages or bed sheets. Instead, they sold their expertise. They helped their customer succeed. Turning buffalo into geese. Soaring to excellence by letting others lead, by customer contact, by selling solutions, not just products. Jim Belasco and Ralph Steyer say the process of change begins with the leader.
The biggest challenge is for that head buffalo to learn how to stop being the head buffalo. That is the challenge.
Which is?
Making the decisions, giving all the orders, being the center of the organization. And rather than the buffalo, the head buffalo being the center of the organization, having the customer be the center of the organization. The biggest challenge is how do you get the buffalo, the head buffalo, first, and then all the rest, to learn how to fly? And the answer, for me at least, the answer is in the last 2 lines of the subtitle of the book, is you have to learn how to let others lead. And the emphasis is learn how to let others lead. And that is the single most difficult thing I, in 58 years worth of living, have ever attempted to accomplish.
Truly.
It is very, very hard, yes. But it's absolutely critical for my success and my organization's success.